Why are all the crashes in the news lately? Is flying an airliner not safe anymore? Stick with me on FlyWire as we take a look at that question. Hi, I'm Scott Perdue, and today on FlyWire we're going to take a big picture look at airline safety. I'm going to give some examples taken right from the headlines, ripped right from the headlines, and then answer some questions at the end. I've been getting a lot of questions lately. Full disclosure, I'm a boomer. I've been flying general aviation airplanes, military fighters, and commercial airliners for over 45 years. Most of my FlyWire videos concern aviation safety from the pilot's perspective. I've done accident investigation in the past, and in my videos generally I pull lessons learned from accidents for pilots so we can all get better, and I think it makes us safer. I guess the first thing is to see what is the safest mode of transportation in the U.S. To answer that question. Okay, there's lots of them: planes, trains, automobiles. I'm not going to look at only certain vehicles. I'm not going to look at horses or buggies or rockets or anything like that. But just to give you an idea of the scale of airline flying in the U.S. in particular, there are over 5,400 airplanes airborne in the FAA system each day. It's in the system. 45,000 flights in the U.S. carrying about 3 million passengers a day, each and every day. That's over 10 million flights being handled by the FAA, carrying over 1 billion passengers a year. That's a big number. That's a lot of people. It's a lot of miles. Prior to this January accident in D.C., there hasn't been a major airline passenger fatality in the U.S. since 2009. Without hitting you with a lot of statistics, airline flying is by far the safest mode of transportation. Okay, it is. And if I wanted to do statistics, you probably wouldn't even be watching now. So even with these 3 high-profile accidents that are in the news, it's still the safest by a factor of at least 100. In the best of conditions, on a clear, calm day, a single airline operation is a very complex machine, vulnerable to delays at any point in the system. Virtually every cog in that system is striving to complete their job safely. I was a cog. The fact that airline travel is the safest mode of transportation is a miracle, given how many different things go into making it all happen. Okay, let's take a brief look at the 3 recent accidents in the news, starting with the CRJ crash at Toronto a few days ago. Okay, there were scattered clouds. It was cold, snow on the ground, and I'm unsure of the actual runway condition at this point, but it appears there was blowing snow. The approach was to runway 23, and the question is, was it contaminated with snow or ice? Okay, I heard varying reports, just like winds. There was blowing snow, and if there was snow on the ground, it was contaminated. Then the crosswind limits, what's important about that is the crosswind limits would be lower. I've heard various reports on the winds at the time of the accident, but it looks like they were from about 40 degrees to the right from 270, somewhere between 23 to 28 knots, and then gusts up to 33 to 40. I've even heard as 45 knots. Well, we'll see. The crosswind limits for the CRJ are 35 knots for a dry runway. You have to do trig to find out what the crosswinds for the CRJ, what it actually experienced, and the result is about half the stated velocity. Okay, so if it's 40 knots, it's 20 knots of crosswind. For a dry runway, that would mean the winds were not out of limits. Okay, I think that's important. If it was contaminated, they were. So let's look at this video shot apparently by an airplane waiting for takeoff on runway 23. Waiting close to the runway at the time of the accident, for some reason, they were videotaping the whole thing. I want you to pay close attention to the descent rate and look at the left of the tail just prior to landing. And when you're going to see it, you're going to see the wingtip, and you're going to watch that big wing.
Oh, fuck. Oh, no.
Did you see the wingtip? It took a big bounce, and that tells us it was a very hard landing. The approach seemed to be well in hand, except right at the end, looking at ADSB, when the flight path descended more rapidly, almost twice as fast. I'm not sure. we don't have a hit for the end, but there appeared to be no flare. Okay, the flare takes up a little bit of the excess descent rate. It looks to me like the right gear touched the ground first and collapsed on landing, pushing into the right wing, and probably broke the structure, punctured a fuel tank, and then sparks initiated the fire. The right wing was structurally compromised, and it departed the airplane. And as the airplane started to rotate to the left, as it did that, the left wing is still producing lift, and then it just rolled the airplane over on its back. And then it stopped, the left wing stopped the airplane from rolling any further, and it stayed on its back like that. Most of the fire was away from the airplane associated with the wing, and that's why nobody was hurt in it. In any accident, particularly airplane accidents, there are a chain of events that lead to the accident. In this CRJ accident, that chain did not include ATC. Most likely it was crew and supervisory related, with several factors leading to the hard landing on that right gear and its subsequent failure. I will say that those wind conditions were sporty, even for the most proficient crew. Okay, gusts to 40, 45 knots, that's a lot. It's big and turbulent. The accident will likely result in reorientation of training and currency requirements. That's my prediction at this point. Let's look at the medevac Learjet crash in Philly at the beginning of February. This is a little harder to explain. We need to wait for the NTSB preliminary report to get any hard data on what happened, but what we do know in this particular accident, the air traffic controllers, the political drama, and personalities were not factors. The airplane took off into weather and overcast at night, overcasting clouds at night, and for some reason the pilots lost control of the airplane and it descended at a very great rate into the ground at nearly 70-degree angle. A loss of control scenario due to spatial disorientation would be the prime suspect taking off into weather at night like this. But the final descent path is not a common one for this type, special disorientation type of accident. Okay, and then the complicating factor is the video published on the news, and somebody was videotaping it because the big ball of flames in the sky meant that, and that means that the airplane was on fire. I expect that fire was directly related to the loss of control by the crew, and that the NTSB will focus on that aspect of it. Okay, I don't know it, but I suspect it. Given that it was a medevac airplane, there would be oxygen bottles under high pressure aboard the airplane in the cabin, and that may have been involved in that fire for one reason or another. We need to be seen. Things need to be figured out here. A lot of unknowns at this point, and in this CRJ accident, and we need to figure out what those links in the chains are, or the NTSB does, and we'll learn it in due course. Which brings me to the DCA midair. This one basically has two error chains that led to the accident. The CRJ crew was executing a circling approach at night to a short runway. Essentially, this means that virtually all of their attention was focused on performing multiple turns at relatively low altitude, to align with runway 33. The pilot, I don't know which one, who was flying, was concentrating on doing the turn and descending at a safe rate. The other pilot was backing up the pilot flying and monitoring the airport and the area for traffic. If I was in the seat, besides monitoring the flight path, I would be searching for a threat forward of the wing, okay? Because as we're in the turn, I should be looking forward of the wing all the way around. Just prior to impact, the crew reacted to a generic traffic call from their onboard system by initiating a climb, and then the impact happened. When I was flying the line and in the military, the airplanes I flew did not have ADS-B in. It didn't even exist back then. ADS-B is a self-announcing technology that became mandatory in most U.S. airspace in 2020. It tells the other traffic and air traffic controllers very precisely what your position is in space and your speed and direction. GE airplanes that I fly now display ADS-B info for traffic near my altitude. Okay, it's optional to have that display ADS-B in the airplane, but it would have been a huge safety addition in this particular situation. I use it all the time. My eyes just aren't as good as they used to be, and it is a safety multiplier, you can say. The two primary error chains here are the Blackhawk crew and the DCA tower controller. I've heard the radio and I've seen the videos, and the my big concern is the controller used non-standard terminology and incomplete calls to point out traffic. Okay? When you talk on the radio, it's not like talking face-to-face. It's not like talking on the phone. When you speak fast and run your words together, like I'm doing right now, it's hard to make out what's being said on the radio. How we get around that problem is by using standard words that mean certain things, specific things, and we arrange the sentence format in a standard way, so then the listener can understand what's being said because they hear it in a format they expect. This information in this part of the statement. Radio conversation is fraught with misunderstanding. In this case, the controller told the Black Hawk about their traffic and to pass behind. It was unclear where the traffic was, and there was 2 airplanes in the air at that time. It was unclear which one was the actual traffic that she was talking about. I think we can impugn and say, okay, she was talking about the CRJ on approach, but she didn't really say that. What she should have said to the Black Hawk was something like this: traffic CRJ circling the land runway 33, 12 o'clock, 4 miles, pass behind that traffic. She also should have called out the Black Hawk traffic for the CRJ, something like this: traffic, helicopter, right 1 o'clock, 4 miles, will pass behind you. Okay? That didn't happen. And that is a major factor in my view. When the NTSB decoded the cockpit voice recorder from the Black Hawk, they noticed a mic key that distorted the controller transmission. It's not clear whose mic was keyed. Not the controllers. It might have been the Black Hawk. It might have been somebody else on the frequency. But radio does not support two-way transmissions. That's an important point here, not like the phone. In short, the helicopter did not hear the traffic call clearly. Per standard procedure, the controller should have repeated the call until the Black Hawk had responded with the phrase "traffic in sight." We'll pass behind, something like that. Was this distraction, complacency, oversight, overwork? I don't know. The NTSB investigation will reveal that issue, okay? But the bottom line is that the controller did not use standard phraseology, did not make radio calls to both airplanes, and did not confirm deconfliction. She said it once, maybe partially twice, and then that's it. She didn't. There was no confirmation of communication being made there. On the part of the helicopter, they were apparently conducting a night check ride utilizing night vision goggles. The important thing to realize is when you're using NVGs, your field of vision is 4 times smaller than the naked eye. In other words, you can see out here with the naked eye, but on NVGs, it's right here. It's like looking at the world through a soda straw and seeing various shades of green. That's what you see, and little bright spots that aren't sharply defined. I've used NVGs to operate vehicles on the ground. I haven't flown them in flight. But I do see that there were enough lights on the ground, as well as departing traffic at the airport, that any lights from those things would have blended into an indistinct jumble, not a distinct airplane, and this is moving on NVGs. The question is, what was the third crew member doing? Okay, if both pilots were on NVGs, someone should have been clearing for traffic with their eyes. The flight path of the helicopter was above the height restriction for the helicopter corridor they were supposed to be in. And at the moment, right now, other questions unanswered are, why were they so high? Was ADS-B on board and working? Did they have ADS-B in? Were they even transmitting on an ADS-B signal? And just what the crew responsibilities there were between the pilot flying and the pilot not flying. In other words, the pilot not flying wasn't clearing for traffic, at least in the threat direction. Given that a similar near midair occurred between an airplane and a helicopter operating near runway 33 just days prior to this accident, raises the questions about controller helicopter pilot adherence to procedures. Were they adhering to the procedures, or were they doing something different? Why was that helicopter over 125 feet higher than the restriction? This is a tragedy, and to some degree, complacency played a role here. You often hear the phrase, there are holes in the Swiss cheese that align to allow this accident to happen. Okay, at least in my business. That phrase means mistakes are made by various humans involved on air travel all the time. Those are the holes in the cheese. For an accident to happen, multiple errors, those holes, must occur in a specific order where they line up to let the accident happen. Luckily, the holes don't line up that often. The fact that it happened does not mean that air travel is suddenly unsafe. It means you were human and need to assess what went wrong and fix those errors. We need to let the NTSB do their investigation and report back to us. Okay? There are issues that need to be fixed here. My nickel is that we try and be adults, find out what the facts are, and then fix the causes. A knee-jerk reaction followed by bad legislation intended to do good often results in unintended consequences. For example, the last fatal airline accident in the U.S. was the Colgan Air accident in New York in February 12, 2009, where 49 people died. Icing conditions, pilot training, and fatigue were major factors. One of the reactions enacted into legislation by Congress mandated a 1,500-hour requirement for pilots to be hired for commercial passenger air travel. The thought being that at 1,500 hours, you're going to be experienced. The trouble is that flying and learning to fly is very expensive, and the net result of that law has been pilots achieving the letter of the law with what amounts to just a few hours of repetitive flying done repeatedly, over and over and over, just to build time. Often without much exposure to flying in adverse weather conditions or responding to emergencies or having to make real decisions in the air and deal with situations that are unusual. Pilots who are working toward proficiency by seeking those varied experiences find that 1,500 barrier much harder to achieve and very expensive. I'm afraid that this might be a factor in the Delta CRJ landing and accident in Toronto. Just stand by and listen up for what happened there. I know some things, but I'm not going to talk about them because I don't know them other than second, third hand. Now I'd like to address some of the direct questions I've gotten on the subject, so let's hit it. So here's the question. What is the role of air traffic control and the role of pilots to listen to them? Well, the role of a pilot, start with that, is kind of like a captain of a ship. He's in charge of the ship. He's the last one in charge of the ship and its safety and its safe operation. So it's up to him to make those kind of decisions. And it gets a little muddy when we start working with air traffic controllers. The very name controller kind of means or seems to imply that they're the ones in charge. In reality, they're not. What they're trying to control, not of the overall operation. What they're trying to do is to sequence traffic in a safe manner. That's the bottom line job of an air traffic controller, is to sequence traffic and keep them apart. Primarily, they're concerned with IFR traffic, and then they mix in VFR traffic as required. So we start off talking to a ground controller. When you get ready to push back from the gate, you get permission, and he's going to fit you in to push back so you don't interfere with other people taxiing, or they run into you, or vice versa. So you push back, you start. When you're ready to taxi, you call ground again and say, hey, I'm ready to taxi. And then he clears you to taxi and gives you the route. What are the taxiways? We don't have names for them. We have taxiway Alpha, Bravo, etc., all the way to a runway that uses a magnetic heading. Runway 33 or 23 in Toronto is 230 magnetic heading. So you follow these directions there, and then you have to talk to the tower controller for permission to take off. Okay, and then after you take off, he sequences you in between landing traffic. And you take off and you're in the air, and once you're in the air, out of the area, you talk to the departure controller, and usually at a TRACON, and then as you climb, he gives you the next step, climb clearance, and then you end up talking to the center controller, and who's the en route air traffic controller, above 18,000 feet. Well, lower than that really, but in general, that's the Class A airspace up there. And you reverse that process all the way down, all the way back to the gate. So the controller's main job is to sequence traffic in a safe manner, okay? And your job as the pilot is to conform to that as much as it is safe to do so, because he may not be seeing, the controller in the tower may not be seeing, or in the center, may not be seeing what's affecting you in particular. I had a near midair from a TCAS call out because the controller at, I think it was about 35,000 feet, had basically run two of us together. And it was a kind of exciting point, but that was a mistake on his part. And TCAS, which is what the CRJ at DC had that call out. That's why he reacted to it just prior to the impact. Sometimes landing is dangerous. Well, anytime you're operating near the ground, the risk factor goes up, okay, because the ground's not forgiving. When you're airborne, you've got a little bit of altitude to deal with any deviation issues. As you get closer to the ground, the whole trick is trying to get on the ground, matching your energy rates in a way that you can handle on a runway, basically, where you can slow down or speed up for takeoff. So where it's difficult is in weather conditions, okay, gusty crosswinds, low altitude clouds, like existed at the Philly Learjet takeoff, had very low altitude clouds, not super low, but pretty low, and then it was up in the clouds at night. Got up to, I believe it was 1,500 feet before it rolled over. So clouds are and weather is an issue, is primarily the big issue. For thunderstorms, landing is a big problem because you have really big wind shears and wind changes, and those are very bad, okay? You have to deal with those, and we train for those in the sim every time we go and do training, recurrency training. Sometimes planes experience issues, yes. Like the CRJ in DC, they were doing what they were told to do, and they were right down the line. And the Black Hawk and the controller had issues between them that were lining up. Those are the holes in the cheese that created the situation for that impact to happen. The Black Hawk being high, not responding to radio calls, maybe not even hearing them, and not responding to the traffic that was there for them, and the controller not using standard terminology or standard procedure by making those radio calls, and then keep pestering until you get a positive response. So that stuff happens, okay? That stuff happens. I want to know why none of these recent crashes are the FAA's fault. I can't say that. I can say probably very unlikely the FAA had anything to do with the Learjet crash and the CRJ in Toronto. It looks like it was all on the crew on that one. But as far as the MAL goes, the DCA crash, I would think it was the two that you heard me talking about it earlier. Would increasing the number of air traffic controllers help prevent crashes? Not necessarily. I think what the situation is right now is that they know what the staffing is they need to cover the traffic they have. They just don't have it fully filled out at this point. For whatever reason, they don't have enough air traffic controllers on duty. And in this particular situation in D.C., they had one controller working VFR helicopters, and they had one controller working airplanes on the runways. And the helicopters are traffic passing by. And for some reason, maybe it was slow that night, and the supervisor decided they could let the helicopter controller go, and that combined traffic into one controller. Okay, not necessarily an unsafe thing if the traffic is light, but as we saw, as I posited here, that there was terminology issues, and that could have been from some complacency, et cetera. So there are some issues that need to be dealt with there. But I don't think increasing the numbers in particular would result in safety. I think that proper procedures and trying to root out complacency is the way we do it. And we do that by training and by having good people in the right positions. This person's concerned about recent FAA firings. The ATC, the controllers, are safe. They're not being fired. But what about laid-off maintenance crews for systems like radar operations, flight data processing, et cetera? It could be. I don't know. I don't know exactly who was laid off. I do know they were probationary employees, which means they were new. Does that mean that they affect maintenance? Well, it didn't happen in time where it would have affected any one of these accidents, even if, and particularly the DC crash. It wouldn't have happened overnight. In other words, the firings, whatever impact they will have, will be felt down the road 2 to 3, 4, or 6 months or more down the road, not immediately. But one thing to think about is the equipment that is being used in the control towers, is it up to date? Okay, is it as effective as it should be? In other words, are they still using the old bright scopes from when I was in, and which is not a very good radar? It's just a blob. You can't really tell much except that there's a blob there, and that's that far out. And what's the altitude? I'm not sure. So ADS-B is very good thing, and maybe they need to have those displays there. That would have definitely helped everybody that's playing right here. When I was in the airline, we didn't have them, and I don't think they have them now. But they should have ADS-B. The people in CRJ would have seen conflicting traffic coming up. The guy not flying should have been seeing that and looking out for it. And the helicopter, if they'd had it on board, one crewman should have been looking for that. So ADS-B is a safety technology that everybody, I think, should be using. It's right there now. Okay. Why does it seem like so many happen in a short time frame? Unfortunately, there are quite a few aviation accidents happen. Most of them are in GA because the number of GA airplanes outnumber the commercial airliners by thousands and thousands. They don't fly as much as the commercial airlines do, but there are a far greater number of them. And so crashes happen. But the reason why this is in the news is because there hasn't been a fatal commercial airline accident since 2009 in this country. And that's going to hit the news. You got to realize what the news is. The news plays on you paying attention, and that usually means something bad happened, or they're going to tell you it's bad. Okay, that's what the news is about. They're not about telling you what's going on in the world. They're about getting your attention so you can watch that ad and they can bill for it. You got to realize what their intentions are. Whoa, let's see. There's one more here. Afraid of turbulence. Turbulence it's really not a bad thing. It can be very uncomfortable. Turbulence is when you have a mass of air moving in another mass of air, okay? They're not the same parcels. In other words, it could be different temperatures, et cetera, and they have two different speeds. One's going this direction, one's going this direction. That means that when those two hit each other, in other words, when they cross, the boundary is going to be very turbulent because there's friction and there's going to be rolling and stuff like that. So that's turbulence that you're going to see in the air. And that's the dangerous kind because people are wandering around in the airliner not having their seatbelts on, and they go up and they stand around and they go to the bathroom and stuff like that. So the clear air turbulence, it's hard to predict. You can predict frontal turbulence associated with fronts. And when I was airline flying, I'm sure they do it now, you spend a lot of time and money, a lot of fuel going around areas where there's turbulence. If somebody's reporting turbulence, you talk about it on the radio all the time. Where is the turbulence? And you try to avoid it. So you spend a lot of time doing that. But it's the air, okay? The air is not homogeneous. It's different temperatures and movements of the air. And when you get the movements, that's turbulent. When you get air blowing across the ground, some of the bottom part gets drugged by the ground, slowed down, but then there's higher velocity air here, but the air's got to go somewhere, so it starts tumbling, you get turbulence, and you got to fly through that. It's not going to make the airplane stop flying, okay? The clear air turbulence that I was talking about at high altitudes is when these two air masses go across like this, you get tumbling, and when you hit that, you're going to move a lot. And if you're not in your seatbelt, you're going to be in trouble. You notice that everybody survived without, and a couple of people had serious injuries, but everybody survived in that CRJ rollover at Toronto. They were wearing their seatbelts. Okay, that's an important thing to remember. One other person has said, the only thing I want to know is what the F, okay? Well, the only thing I can really say to that question is, well, the S happens. It just does, because we're humans and we operate machines and life is not safe. It's not a cocoon. We have to take risks. And what I'm saying is that mitigating risks, and the airlines are very good at mitigating risks. They train all the time. They have procedures and all that. But we're still human. We still make mistakes. And we can fix those. And that's what we need to do in this case. So don't stop flying. I'm not. So hope that helps and answers some of your questions. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you next time on FlyWire.